We had a listener, I think Greg, a couple days ago, mention something about our conversation about Tampa and the Panama Canal, and she wanted us to unpack that for her. What was that about? I think you and I were just talking before we started doing this segment a little bit about it, and I think you're going to have to jog my memory on it.
Okay, cool. It was actually our maiden voyage. The very first episode of Power Play, we talked about Tampa, Florida. And one of the mega trends that I said Tampa was attached to was the expansion of the Panama Canal. And this listener apparently heard that and said, whoa, hey, put the brakes on that. Let's hear more about that. So it's a great thing to come back and highlight. And here's the basis of it. Okay, the shipping, the manufacturing in Asia and the shipping of all those products from Asia, China, that come to the U.S., they had two options. Okay, they would come across on ships, land in like Long Beach, California, land in the ports on the West Coast, and then hop on trains and trucks and make their way to the population centers, largely in the upper Midwest and the Northeast, where the big population is on the East Coast. And 100 years after the original digging of the Panama Canal, which for people who aren't totally familiar, check out a map and you'll see at the middle of, right where North America and South America connect, they cut a canal 100 years ago, and that canal was not deep enough for these largest ships. Okay, so over these 100 years, the ships got bigger and bigger, the container ships, naturally, right? They got bigger and bigger, carry more and more stuff, but it got to a point where the really big ships, the ones that were super efficient bringing things from China, they just couldn't get through the canal. And so they used to come through the canal and make their way around, but decades ago they started going to California. Okay, so on the 100-year anniversary, they, which is coincidental, they dug the canal. They dug it deeper, they dug it wider, and they made it capable of handling what has now become known as PostPanamax ships. Panamax is the biggest size that couldn't get through the canal. Now they can get through. As a result of that, the port cities in the Gulf of Mexico, right, on the right side of the hemisphere, the Gulf of Mexico, which includes Houston, which we love, we love them all, Houston, New Orleans, Tampa, Miami, Jacksonville, Savannah, Charleston, Wilmington, Norfolk, Virginia, right, all the way up to New Jersey and Newark. But really those Gulf Coast and Southeast U.S., it has become ungodly efficient for those ships to come through the canal now, not get off in California, but come all the way through and land on this side. That's a mega trend. That's a mega trend when it comes to real estate. Like if you were going to invest in the stock market, you might say social media is a mega trend I want to invest in. Technology of various kinds is a mega trend I want to invest in. Mobile technology. Well, the Panama Canal is a mega trend. It's impacting a half a dozen U.S. cities in a way that, like all the things that were going on in favor of like Tampa, like we talked about in episode 1, all those things about migration out of the Northeast, about climate, quality of life, low cost of living, no state tax, all those things exist for every city in Florida. But Jacksonville, Miami, and Tampa, they've got big ports, okay?
Yeah.
So they're being lifted by the Panama Canal thing. And so the question is, for somebody listening, number one, do any of the cities I just named, Houston, New Orleans, Miami, Tampa, Jacksonville, Savannah, Wilmington, Norfolk, do any of those ring a bell with you in terms of having some kind, do you live there, right?
Right.
Do you go vacationing there?
Yeah.
Did your spouse grow up there and so you go back and visit your in-laws there? Do you have any hook in your life to any of those cities? That's an interesting starting point, right? And like Abhi, any of those cities did they cross your path at some point? Any of those?
I mean, every now and then I want to go vacation more. So I'm just thinking about setting up shop and checking them out, really.
Yeah, like awesome decision. So if you said, hey, the Tampa Bay area is pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Or I like Bourbon Street. And that sounds like something. You sound like a foodie, drinky guy to me. So
I might be a little bit. I definitely like my food and I definitely like my cocktails.
Okay, so maybe it's New Orleans, right?
There we go.
If you're going to go buy a condo in New Orleans, that's probably a bad idea. But,
right.
But no, New Orleans is a gorgeous city besides Bourbon Street.
Yeah.
But across the board, what we try to, I love when people seize upon something like this. So I'm glad that the listener called and asked about it, because I use the term lift. A market that has migration coming from New York because of climate and cost of living and quality of life has lift. A market that also is attached to the Panama Canal has more lift. Now the question is, you start reading about what the government is doing and what the private and public partnerships in that city are doing to issue bonds, raise a bunch of millions of dollars and invest it, or hundreds of millions of dollars, or even billions of dollars, and invest it in digging their port. Like Charleston is an example, Jacksonville, great examples of markets
yes.
that dug, okay, and expanded so that they could fit those post-Panamax ships in there.
The same with Savannah as well.
Yeah. You can go and see how much money they've invested. You can see how cooperative. You can get a feel for how cooperative the government is with the businesses in that market. You might find, for example, that the mayor and the city council in one of these cities just turned over to the other side, and they ran on stopping all this crazy progress with the port. Like, that kind of stuff happens. And so you can say, as much as I love City X, and I don't have any examples of that, okay? They're all digging deep to dig deep. They're all doing what it takes to expand their ports. That is a phenomenal starting point. And we'll talk about a lot of other examples here on Power Play where there's another mega trend happening that is going to give extra lift to a market that already has lift. And if you've got a 20 or 30 year time horizon on your investments, you see what happens when a marketplace doubles and then redoubles in population and job penetration because of these kinds of long-term mega trends. You start to put yourself in a position where, of course, nothing is guaranteed, but you got to make a lot of mistakes to screw that up. You know what I mean?
It's like taking a really easy elective in college and trying to fail. Like, that's exactly what it is.
You have to try. That's exactly the way to put it. If you invest in Jacksonville, Florida right now, and you buy good houses in good school districts, and you get good tenants in place, maybe you hire a good property. If you do good, because you did great on your selection of a market, you have to try to fail in order to fail. You have to try hard.
So we have maybe 30 seconds before we have to end the show, Greg. I know that there are a lot of cities that are jumping out at you in the Gulf of Mexico Atlantic region. What's like, if you have a limited amount of capital, what's the one city, maybe two cities that you would go to?
I'm going to say Savannah. And I like them all, but I'm going to say Savannah because it's the one that people might not expect. And here's why. It's got the lift of people flocking to the southeast, flocking to Georgia. Atlanta's getting crowded. Savannah is a coastal city. Savannah might be the next Charleston. Okay, it's got a cool downtown. It's got the foodie, drinky trend going on. It's got the port, and it's the underappreciated southern coastal city between and Charleston's off like a shot. Okay, it is a rocket ship right now. So you watch an announcement of a big company going to Savannah, and then you know you have a winner. And by the way, great place to go on vacation. So maybe you should take a trip there from Atlanta and start feathering your nest in Savannah.
You know, I might just try doing that. There is too much traffic in Atlanta anyway, right? Like, get out of my city. No, everybody's welcome in Atlanta. Just, leave. But I'm a huge fan of Savannah. My wife and I vacation there a lot. And you go there and you see the investment that's being made into the port, and it's incredible. Again, the backbone of the conversation that Greg and I always have is don't pay attention to hair on fire media and have a long-term perspective on your real estate investments. That's it. If you're a flipper and you're paying attention to this and you're thinking, well, gee whiz, what you guys are saying kind of makes sense to me, but kind of doesn't, let this continue to serve as a wake-up call, because long-term investing, cash flow, and obviously finding good tenants to pay those properties off over 15 years, how is that not a winner?